12 in this book. Page number 12. I don't know. I am very enticed to give you. I want to give you this. This is today's chitas. I printed it.
Oh, what is? Wow. What is it? Today's chitas.
Yeah. This is today's chitas of the day, which is a very powerful letter of the Alter Rebbe, which is really connected to this whole concept. The Alter Rebbe ends off the b'tachon the Eibishter. How does a Jew need to have b'tachon the Eibishter? What is the meaning of true b'tachon in God? And how do we come to that concept? So I'd like to knock it through, just to do it again. Those I know you were on the chitas already, but you can listen to it again, right, Moshe? Yeah.
I like the idea of not the only one we have to please, the only one we have to is Hashem.
So so the one so here the Alter Rebbe says, so I'm going to knock it through because we did it already, but I think it's a great. We're holding on page 12 in this book. I'm just going to go through the Alter Rebbe's letter, and you can take this home. We're going to do it quickly, so you can take it home and read it again and again and again, so that maybe it can penetrate my head. L'haskell being an Alter Rebbe, and to lighten you with understanding. Meaning by desiring the life of flesh and children and sustenance. You have these two things that a person has a desire for. He has a desire, naturally has a desire for liyes chafetz b'chayim b'sarim b'zayne ubani umezayne. A person has a desire for the life of flesh and children and sustenance. This is not a negative desire. This is a positive desire. We all should have Baruch Hashem families and parnasa and livelihood, but this is not the purpose. That's all. This is not the ends to a means. This is not really you're involved in something which is wonderful, which is there for the real purpose of why God sent you down to the world for, and you're getting involved in things that are only as are secondary, even though they're pashut important to every person. And this is what the sages meant in Pirkei Avos: battle etzeincha, nullify your desire whatsoever for any worldly matters. It says nullify your desire, not nullify your worldly matters. Nullify your desire for worldly matters. A person shouldn't have any desire for worldly matters. He should have worldly matters. He should acquire worldly matters, but not have a desire. The desire should be for the Eibishter, for the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is batal etzeincha. That means, the Alter Rebbe says, simply, that you incorporate within the general categories of children and life and sustenance. Yeah, this means that one should set aside his own will, because it is not coincide with God's will, but that from the outset, one should be nullified, that he has no desire whatsoever for worldly matters, that are incorporated within three general categories of children, life, and sustenance. Yeah? So although these are essential, and though they affect one's divine service, they should be desired not for themselves, but only insofar as they further the accomplishment of one's spiritual task. That was the beauty of last night. The Rebbe also spoke about the concept of people that have talents, whether it's talents in music, whether it's talents in writing, whether it's whatever talents the Eibishter gave you, is basically there for that purpose, the purpose of how to bring this talent, godliness into the world. And that should be the whole reason. Not that you can write a book, not that you can, you know how to play music. That has what does that need for that? It's only needed for the concept of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The above directive to nullify, thus implies bitul b'metzius, and utterly nullification of the self. Confronted by a scholar of stature, a lesser scholar may experience self-effacement, but he still remains self-assertive personality. Utterly nullification, by contrast, means that this sensation of self ceases to exist. In a similar vein, nullifying one's own wishes before God connotates the absence of any wishes other than God's. One should thus live in the spirit of the teaching of our sages of blessed memory, that against your will do you live, meaning one should view the corporal aspects of life as being contrary to his will. Against your will do you live. In Sandra, we usually translate it, Bakar Chatachai, you're forced to live. You're forced to live. What does that mean? We usually translate it that the person has no choice of life and death. You're born not because you ask for it, and you die not because you want to. You're forced to live. That's the way, about the expression in the Mishnah, it says, Bakar Chatameis, you're forced to live, Ubakar Chatachai, and you're forced to die. So it seems like the concept of life is a force upon you. The Alter Rebbe translates different, and says, Bakar Chatachai means that you live a corporal life, you're forced to do that. That's against your will. That you have to go eat and sleep and go to work and deal with Yedim Mishagas, every craziness in the world. That's against your will. Because your whole will, the whole will a person was created for, was created to serve God. I was but created to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to serve God. Can you imagine you have such a kind of, if you had such a kind of understanding, that we're here for one purpose, and that is how to bring God to the world. That's our purpose. Nothing else is important.
But when you talk about like someone who has a talent, the talent isn't their talent anyway. The talent is from Hashem.
Yeah, but but therefore, if he would only use his talent, if he felt it was from Hashem, he would only use his talent for good things. But that he uses his talent for others, then that serves. He writes the Rebbe said yesterday, he writes a book, and in his book he doesn't bring out any concept of godliness in it. Then he's wasting his talent. He's basically wasting. He has a great talent. He's writing a book, or let's say he's writing. The Rebbe says he's a reporter, and he's writing reports. And in his reports, there's no concept of godliness. There's no aspect of where people walk away and say, "Oh, now I know what the news is." So the Rebbe gave an example. A guy's writing a story about what's happening in the war, and he's telling you what's happening at the war, and there's no purpose in it but to tell you what's happening at the war. What does a person need to know what's happening at the war? Besides that, there's a purpose that you're supposed to portray to the person in the way he's supposed to service HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way he's supposed to serve God. So what's the divine providence happening there? What godly situation happening there? That's what you have to bring out in everything that you do. So the main thing of last night's video was a guy was the Pimenta. These two guys, Avi and Yossi Pimenta, who they became from, and they were musicians. One was played the guitar, and one played the flute. And they came from. They wanted to drop their because they played the hard rock, and they wanted to basically what can you do with hard rock as from a Jew. But the Rebbe told them no. That they should use it out for the stuff. So since music today has a very bad, extremely bad influence on society, so you have to take music and show that music can have a positive influence on society, and people can be uplifted, and people can be brought to a better place through music, and then be brought to a worse place, immodest place, immoral place. Take music and use it out l'tayv, and that was
so that it becomes more godly.
Right. So that's your avodah. So that's your service. So that's your service, and that's what they did. It's exactly what they did. So they were thinking of dropping it and just going into a different profession, but the Rebbe told them, no, don't drop it. You're talented. The Eibush gave you a talent, so why drop it? Use it out for l'tayv, and that's looking. That's not to. It's usually in general. In times of Alter Rebbe, the more religious you are, the more you separate yourself from the world. The Alter Rebbe Chassidus didn't want a person to separate himself from the world. Chassidus wanted a person to use the world. So not run away from the world. The world is not evil. The world is a vessel for where God needs to rest. Dida Patartein, the resting place of God needs to be in this world. So therefore, you need to use out the world.
I think Piamenta weren't just the two, they had a whole band, right?
Right, they made a band, but it was really the two guys.
But they came to I'll tell you a quick story. They came to New Orleans in 1980, when I was there, between 86 and 90. Sometime in there, and they were having a concert at UNO. So of course I went, and I was sitting in the back, and I was hearing the students go, "Oh, it's one of these religious bands. It's going to be discussed." As soon as they played music for Hashem, basically, but the rhythms,
right?
The whole place stood up. They couldn't believe. Here they are with their tzitzit. In New Orleans, of all places.
Right, yeah, that's what they said.
A group of
so they said that's what they did.
Semites, and they basically, with their music, turned the whole thing around.
So the way this is printed, actually, the Hebrew went after the English. I don't know why. In the actual thing, it's the Hebrew before the English. This printed. That's why it's getting me mixed up a little bit. So I see that it flipped it. The copying it flipped it. The copy and paste flipped the Hebrew and English away. So the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that a Jew can achieve a total lack of yearning for physical things, even things that are essential, or according to explanation that follows. It should be seen that one can go beyond this and even not be pained by their absence. Indeed, this equanimity in the face of the deprivation proves that he derives no pleasure from these things when he does not have them. For it's possible for a person not to derive conscious pleasure from something and still to be delight in the subconsciously. The proof is that he grieves mightily at his loss, and the pain is the exact counterpart of the pleasure. So he's going to explain this concept, how that the world, whether you have or you don't have, whether you have and you don't have, shouldn't affect your delight in your purpose of life. Whether you have a lot or you have minimum, or you have very minimum, or you actually, as the Alter Rebbe say, you have pain and suffering in this world. Some people have pain and suffering in this world. It should not affect you in the purpose of what God sent you in the world for. Because if it's going to be secondary, if it's only going to be there for something else, then it will never ever affect you whatsoever to your purpose of your existence. So beer inyan, and you really need to understand this as we read it today. Beer inyan, the clarification of this matter. How can you achieve a state of not desiring physicality, or even those things most crucial to existence, as follows? Hurak emuna amitis, that can be achieved only when there's absolute belief in the Yotzer Beratious, in the one who created the beginning, in the trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You cannot accomplish this. That means if I don't have emunas Hashem, it's impossible for me to accomplish this concept, to have basic total trust in the Eibishter. It's impossible if I don't have this and not feel the world and not be affected by what's happening in the world. It will be impossible if I don't believe in God. If I don't have belief in God and trust in the Eibishter and trust in God, I cannot have. Then the world does affect me, because I am affected by the world, and what happens in the world affects me, and it totally because the world is in me are basically either we're in sync or we're not. And what I understand, what the purpose of my life in the world is, to make a living, or to be successful, or to be healthy, or to be wealthy, and it's not happening. Right? Sometimes it's not happening. We want to be healthy, and we're not healthy. We want to be wealthy, and we're not wealthy.
Do you
We want to have this kind of amount of family, and we don't have this amount of family. We have less, or we have too much. Whatever you might translate it, right? Because basically, since my purpose in the world is X, Y, and Z, and the X, Y, and Z is not happening.
You know, I was
Just
just
one
thinking
piece
while
of
you're
mind.
talking, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't start being Moshe Rabbeinu, I think, until, like, there's no mention of his children. Like, the whole nation was his children. Like, he had children, but there's no mention of his rearing of them or
Right.
involved with them. Maybe this is what you're saying.
He was too busy.
That he had a mission and he was fulfilling the mission, was the whole nation was his family.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that. I don't think that that means that you should not have time for your family. And actually, that was something the Gemara says Moshe Rabbeinu felt bad that he didn't have that because he had actually a greater relationship with his brother's children than with his own children. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was limud Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu was the aspect of learning Torah, and his nephews were more into the aspect of learning Torah than his own children, and therefore he felt that relationship, which he felt that there was not a relationship with his kids. And that was his. Nobody's perfect in this world, and that's why he basically was sad at the end of his days that his children did not become the leaders that he imagined them to become, right? Because Aaron had children that became kohanim and became leaders in the father's stead. Well, his children did not do that. His children, Moses did not. The next leader was Joshua, was not even from his family. Yeah. So it was totally something that he felt. Whether nobody's challenging Moshe Rabbeinu, whether he felt that he was perfect or he was lacking in that aspect.
Did they
how could his children grow up? Aaron was with his children.
Moshe
was not. So how could...
I'm not here challenging Moshe. I'm not here at all challenging Moshe. We all have the same challenge in life, that the way we ultimately integrate our relationship with our children. It's not something that's simple. It's something that some people have better and some people have a less. Because your children are their own identity too. Most of us want our children to have our identity. And it doesn't always work that way, because the Eibishter created the children to have their own identity. But that's a separate issue, yeah.
A very quick question.
Yeah.
Did they cross into Eretz Israel, with Joshua?
Yeah.
Joshua was from
his children became his family, Moshe Rabbeinu's children and his family became later they mentioned in the prophets, they became big families, very very wealthy and big families. So they are mentioned. That he had children and he had grandchildren, and they came, but they didn't become Jewish leaders. That was Moshe Rabbeinu's feeling lack of him establishing the next Moshe Rabbeinu would be his child. It was not.
Joshua was from Joseph?
Joshua was the tribe of Joseph, yes, Ephraim. So the Alter Rebbe brings down the Aleinu l'shabeach when we say in davening. Aleinu l'shabeach actually was authored by Joshua, Yeshua, who brought the Jews into Eretz Yisrael. He authored Aleinu when they came into Israel. So we say it every davening at the end of davening. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol. We say it's incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all things. L'seis gedula l'yetzer Beratious, to exalt the Creator of all existence. L'yetzer Beratious, to create the Creator of all existence. So it's just an instinct. It's a playoff of the word Beratious in the beginning of creation. It's also in the pasuk Beratious. Beratious in the beginning. So we call l'yetzer Beratious, to the Creator of the beginning. Actually, when the Torah writes Beratious bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, it really should have said that God created the beginning. That's really what the verse should have said. In Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara says, Moses says to God, it should have said Hashem bara Beratious, that the Eibishter created the beginning. Why did it say Beratious bara Elokim? Why did it say in the beginning God created? People might think beginning was created God. You can translate the verse also that way. Beratious bara Elokim. In the beginning was created God. You can almost say that kind of, God forbid, you can come to that also, that interpretation. And God answers, the one who wants to come and make a mistake, let him come and make a mistake. So that's why I'll write it the way I want to write it. And I'm writing it that people should understand it. And if they want to make a mistake, let them make a mistake, because that's part of life, to do things correct, to do things wrong. So the truth is, this concept that the Torah says, Beratious, in the beginning, so Rashi right away says, why does the Torah start with Beratious in the beginning, with an interesting word? You know, the Torah should have started, I am God your God, who took like the first commandment. I am God your God, who created the world. I am God your God, who took you out of Egypt, whatever. Why does it say Beratious? And Rashi answers because Beis Ratious. Rashi says that's why the letter Beis in the Chumash is big. Letter Beis means two. Beis Ratious. It's because there were two beginnings. God created the world because of two beginnings. Because there are two entities in the world that are called the Ratious beginning. One is wisdom. Torah is wisdom. That's really the beginning. Everything begins with wisdom. Everything begins with Torah, which is wisdom. And the Jewish people are also called in the Tanakh Beratious. So the world was created for two entities, for the Torah, which is the purpose, and the Jew, who will fulfill the purpose, who will accomplish the purpose of creation. So Beis Beratious. So what means Beratious? Really, Beratious doesn't mean the beginning. Beratious means with the beginning. With the beginning. With the beginning of creation that God created the world. What is the beginning of creation? If in our best comprehension, what is the beginning of creation? What's the beginning? When you say in the beginning, what was the beginning? So in the beginning is Chachma, is wisdom. Everything is created with wisdom. That's the beginning. The beginning of everything is wisdom. And that's why everything ultimately comes through wisdom. Everything ultimately is directed through wisdom. Mind over matter, ultimately in a human being itself. His wisdom needs to be the thing that is the beginning, and because it's the beginning in the middle and the end. And that's why the Torah is emes. It's the beginning, the middle, and the end. So it's the beginning, it's the purpose, and it's ultimately the end of the story is going to be what the Torah wants, and therefore it's the beginning and the middle and the end. So it all starts off with the wisdom. With the concept of wisdom. What is wisdom? What is chachma? So if you have to say that the world is created through wisdom, what is chachma? What is wisdom? Wisdom is really something that is, because there's two concepts. There's wisdom and there's understanding. Chachma and bina. Wisdom and understanding. What's the difference between wisdom and understanding? So Chassidus explains that wisdom is something that's greater than understanding. Wisdom is something that's higher than understanding. That means wisdom cannot be understood. If I have bina, once I have understanding, then it's not wisdom anymore. So wisdom, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in the beginning of Tanya, wisdom means koyach ma. That's the Hebrew word chachma. Koyach ma means what is it? That's why wisdom is unlimited. The most unlimited thing in a human being is his wisdom. Is no limitations. The second his wisdom comes into understanding, now he has limitations. That's why learning never ends. Right? Learning never ends because it never comes into true wisdom never comes into a total understanding. So there's wisdom that is understood, and then there's a sustained wisdom that is above understanding. And that's true wisdom. True wisdom, which is chachmeilah, the true aspect of wisdom, is above our understanding. Something that is beyond our, and that's why we can constantly grow and we can constantly change. Why can we constantly grow and we can constantly change? Because we're always connected to wisdom. Nobody can tell you have to be this way, and you have to be this way forever. You don't have to be this way. You can always be something else. There's always other options. That's like if you believe in the Eibush, there's not one option. There's not one option in this world. There's no such kind of thing. Yeah, if I believe in myself, then basically this is the way I was brought up, this is the way I was taught, and that's the option. There's no other option. But if I believe in God, then I believe in the concept of wisdom, so there's unlimited amount of options.
I'm having Okay, so this is like a little above me, but I'm having one of my out there thoughts. Can I share it?
If it's connected.
It's connected.
Should we learn a little bit more? Maybe we'll maybe all your answers will
Okay.
maybe all your questions will be answered.
Let him say.
Because you have to really comprehend. It's not something that's easy. Let's learn a little bit, and then we'll see if you
Yeah.
because Abraham and those that are sitting here and they don't hear you.
How-
So there's
What?
like 4 there. So
I keep forgetting this.
so this can be achieved only when there's an absolute belief in the Yotzer, the one who formed Beratious beginning. So literally, the opening words of the Aleinu prayer, this phrase refers to God as the one who formed the first beginning of creation. In Kabbalistic words, however, Bereshit also connotates Sfira, which is called Chachma, wisdom. The Alter Rebbe hence uses this phrase here to allude to God as one who created everything by means of Bereshit, which is Chachma. The Eibishter God created everything through wisdom. And if I can comprehend that God created, it's important. Chassidus want to tell you it's important that you realize that the Eibishter created everything Chachma. You think, even though there's Esses Sfirot, there's 10 manifestations, and we always mention Malchus, the concept of kingship, and the aspect of that's the one who creates, but no, everything comes from Chachma. And Malchus, the concept of kingship would not be there without the attribute of Chachma. Everything needs to come through wisdom.
So wisdom is Hashem.
Wisdom, that's what it says. The wisdom, you can't separate wisdom from the Eibishter. That's why the Rambam writes that Hu Amadi, he's the knowledge and he's the knower. That's the greatness of wisdom. The greatness of wisdom, since everything comes to wisdom, and you cannot separate God from his wisdom. In a human being, there's him and there's his wisdom. That's the difference between God and a human being. There's the human being, there's him, and there's what he understands. By God, there's no separation between him and another entity. So therefore, God is wisdom. And therefore, as a Jew, we believe the Torah is the Eibishter, and the Eibishter God is the Torah. Because you cannot separate the wisdom from God. And therefore, they're one entity. And therefore, cannot be changed. It will never be changed. Nothing can happen to the Torah. That's why it says, I mentioned yesterday, the Mina Eish Doslami, that the Torah is the fire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the fire of God.
Why does it have to be so complicated?
So this is not complicated at all. This means, so here we come to another terminology that we mention in Chassidus, in Kabbalah many times. And that is that creation comes from something from nothing. Yesh me'ayin. You hear this throughout Chassidut. Yesh me'ayin. Something from nothing. So you have that. Now that's an interesting expression. Something from nothing. We're calling God nothing.
No.
Something from nothing. That doesn't sound really politically correct to call God the ayin. So how do we say yesh mi ayin? It's really ayin mi yesh. Really, the God is the real something, and we're really nothing. So, but we don't do that. We say something. We are something, and God is ayin, nothing.
No.
That's the expression yesh mi ayin. This is the meaning of yesh, which yesh means that which exists, out of the state of ayin from nothingness, which is called Reishis Chachma. So the nothing is really, we say it's nothing, not because it's nothing, because to us it's beyond comprehension. And that's why we call it nothing. Not because it's nothing, like the way you translate it in English, but it's nothing because it's beyond our comprehension. It's a wisdom that's above our wisdom. So we have yesh. Yesh is something because we comprehend it. A yesh is something because we look at it as a something, or we feel it as a something. And there's certain things in my life that is above my comprehension. That's why I say, wow, it's something that's above my comprehension, and therefore it's nothing. It's something. Nothing is in a positive way. It's something that cannot be put into a box, so to say. It cannot be put into a comprehended aspect. What is that concept? That concept is the higher wisdom. So there's lower wisdom and there's higher wisdom. Right? There's the wisdom I can comprehend. And ultimately, I'm a human being. and therefore I have to come to the conclusion that there has to be a wisdom that I don't comprehend. Right? So let's say even in human being, I stand in front of a great sage. What is my wisdom to him? Right? What is my wisdom to this great sage? Nothing. It's nothing. My wisdom is basically, what's my wisdom? So I don't have to go to the Eibishter. So even to a regular human being, another regular human being, when this person is a great sage, my wisdom is nothing to his wisdom. Right? So if I can have that in front of a great sage, so why did the Eibishter, I have to find that, wow, my wisdom is not as great as his. It's just simple. So that's not a hard to understand. Like the Eibishter has a wisdom that's higher than my wisdom. So even if I look at the pasuk, a regular pasuk, like sometimes you learn Chumash and you learn Chumash, you think, what's like, it's so simple. Like, it sounds so harsh. Like, today's learning, it sounds like, what's going on over here? Self-understood, there's a higher wisdom behind it. There's God's wisdom. There's the way I look at the verse and the way God looks at the verse. And what?
Because we're supposed to go out and conquer these people.
Whatever, all these concepts or whatever, these people, the concepts, these aspects in the Torah of a wayward son, whatever, these concepts, it sounds like very, extremely harsh concepts, but really, this is the wisdom of God. I have to take that. This is what the Eibishter wanted. What do I know? Why do I have a comprehension in this true aspect? There's a higher wisdom in it. And maybe if I learn and learn and learn and learn, maybe I'll come to have an understanding in it. Maybe not. And maybe not. I'm not the genius of the world. So I'm not the one who's the smartest in the universe. So I do my best, and I ultimately realize maybe somebody else will have an interpretation. Maybe that person won't have an interpretation. Even Rashi sometimes say, I don't know. Rashi even sometimes says, I don't know. So if Rashi says, I don't know, you expect me to know. So why? Because there's things that are above comprehension. Doesn't mean that there's no comprehension to it. It means that my wisdom has its limitation. And there's greater wisdom out there. In Kabbalah, in Chassidus, we have the Chokhmah, the way it comes into the world, into the Torah even, and then there's Chokhmah Law, there's Beratious Chokhmah, the beginning of wisdom. So that's why even King Solomon, who was given the gift of wisdom, what did he say? Achakma, I have wisdom, but through my wisdom, I've realized that how far wisdom is from me, how far wisdom is from me. So he was given the gift of wisdom. But a smart man realizes that there's greater wisdom, there's greater understanding, and that's why the truth is, the Gemara says also a different expression. A person who says I've acquired wisdom doesn't know what wisdom is. He has no comprehension of what wisdom means. You can't acquire wisdom. You cannot bottle wisdom. You cannot take control of wisdom. That's why Ezu Chacham Aleid Mikol Adam. A person who is wise learns from everything. Well, Shemta said you can learn from a leaf, flipping in the street. So, why? Because everything, wisdom is unlimited. It's unlimited. I can't say I cannot learn from you. You have nothing to teach me. And you hear that expression, people do say that. You have nothing, that's not true. Then you don't know what wisdom is, because the Eibishter brought every person in the world. Every person is unique, and every person has something to give. And if I have something to give, that means I have a certain wisdom that nobody else has. And I have that capability of giving that wisdom. Now, this Chachma, so let's go. That's the meaning of true wisdom. True wisdom is the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom is not the way the wisdom comes within. True wisdom is wisdom that doesn't come within anything. Something that is continuous. That's true wisdom. True wisdom is something that continues. That there's no completion to this wisdom. That's why the beauty of Gemara. You learn Gemara, you think after 5 pages, you think you came to a conclusion, and the Gemara says no, he throws the whole thing away. Because the purpose of the Gemara is not to come to a conclusion. It's not the purpose of that Shulchan Aruch. You want to go to Jewish law, go to Jewish law, and you get the conclusion. The Gemara is the concept of wisdom. Wisdom doesn't come to a conclusion. It's an ongoing discussion. And that's why the Gemara continues we continue to interpret the Gemara and argue with the Gemara and explain the Gemara, and the sages continue to grow. It never ends. It never ends. The Torah never ends because wisdom never ends.
I just want, from wisdom, can people have just passion to want to learn, does it have to be wisdom? I have a passion. I don't have the wisdom. I'm new with.
You have a wisdom. If you didn't have wisdom, you wouldn't have passion. Everything starts with your brain. You cannot have passion in anything if you have no brain. If you're brain dead, you cannot have passion in anything. So everything starts with your brain. Your ratzon can push your brain, but everything has to start with your brain. Everything has to start with the brain. It can be a conscious brain. There can be subconscious. You can today even they say you're not using 1/5 of your brain. So that means 95% of your brain is dormant, sleeping. So it's basically there, waiting to be used. Because that's why some people they check their brains. They see they have a young brain or they have an old brain. So you use it or you lose it. So we're supposed to use our brain, and everything starts with chachma. It starts with your brain, and that's your free choice. That's what makes you a human being. That's real free choices in your chachma. So the second you say this is the way I am, you lost your free choice. So you cannot say this is the way it is. That's not wisdom. This is the way it is ready now. You brought it down to understanding, bina, and now you have lost your chachma. Chachma says, maybe it's not like this. Maybe it needs to be different. Maybe it needs to be different. You always need to find out maybe it's different. I said yesterday a story, unbelievable story of Yehuda Avner. Yehuda Avner, he was a what do you call it?
He's a writer.
He was an advisor to 5 prime ministers in Israel.
Yes.
Right, so it's a powerful story. He said in 1975, there was a big Henry Kissinger was in Israel. There were whole negotiations, and it was out of Shabbos, and it was not a good meeting. And he left. Henry Kissinger left, and he said he's going to make a statement by tomorrow. He's going to give a statement on Shabbos. He's going to give a statement. So the prime minister, who was then Rabin, turned to Yehuda and he said to him, I'm telling you the story even though I'm saying names because he wrote it in his book. So it's a powerful story. The guy wrote this in his book. So he said to him, it's out of Shabbos. He was a former Jew. He said, it's out of Shabbos. I can't do this. I'm going to now Shabbos. I'm going home. I'll see you after Shabbos. He said, what do you mean? He said, what do you mean it's out of Shabbos? It needs to be done. If he's going to come out with a statement before you, it's not going to be good. You need to work on it. He said, no. We're trying to be a holy Jew. He said, no. And he left. He said on Shabbos afternoon, he was in shul. He said even the name of the shul, I don't remember. He said, he was in shul. And there was a great rabbi, his name was Shnei Zalman Auerbach, who was actually in the shul at the same time. And they were sitting at Shalosh Shudas or whatever, in the shul. And he told him this story. He was like proud of himself that, he showed, that Shabbos and you don't break the Shabbos. So the rabbi said to him, he said, who said you were right?
He said that you were right?
Who said you were right? Who said you were right? Did you ask a question? So who said you were right? Maybe if you would have asked me, I would have said maybe it's Pikuach Nefesh. Maybe your statement is going to change it will have a great effect on what's going to happen to the Jewish people. So who said you're right? You have to ask the question. Just because you think you're holy doesn't mean you're holy. You have to find out if that's what the Torah wants you to do.
So who says the rabbis, right?
What?
Who says the rabbis?
Because he's following the Torah, because you trust in the rabbi. The Torah says you got to trust the rabbi. You cannot live a life the Torah says you got to trust the rabbi. It's his problem. So that's going to be his problem. If you don't, unless you know you're 100% right, don't do something.
It's okay to discuss mundane things on Shabbos?
It's an important thing. It's an important thing.
You're a leader.
I'm telling you the story. And he came back. He ran back to the Knesset. that Saturday night. He comes back in, they were all actually still in the office, and then they told him, you missed the boat. We missed the boat, because he made a statement, and then the president made a statement. So he said, I learned a great lesson from that story. That just be sure to think you're doing something right. Davka, you're doing something right. You have to be sure. You have to ask somebody a question. Especially when it's concerning others, you have to ask the question. You have to say l'charab, make yourself a rabbi, to make sure that's what you think you're doing the right thing. That's not maybe the right thing. So it's your wisdom, but might not be the correct. Right? So you might have to learn. You might have to. That's the lesson. So wisdom. That's what the Rebbe begged everybody to say l'charab. A person should have a rabbi. You can ask questions. How do the rabbis, right? But that's unlimited. That question. Because that's even lastly the Torah says, even though I have a great rabbi, I need Moshe. I can only ask my questions to Moshe. I only can ask my questions to Moses. And as long as Moses is not here, I don't trust anybody. Moses, I'll trust. So until Moses arrives, I'm not going to ask my questions to anybody. You can't do that. It's not the way things are. You have to ask the person that's in your generation, and that's it. That's why you can't live that way. So once you ask a Rav a question, he tells you what to do. Now it's on his shoulders. It's on his conscience. It's on his responsibility. But to do on yourself your own chachma, to do something because you think that that's the right thing to do, that's what we learn. Because if I'm going to go on my own chachma, then my chachma is limited. My wisdom is limited. Therefore, I always, and this is important, I always should realize there's a greater chachma than me. Not only is there a greater chachma, greater wisdom than me, another person, but there's greater wisdom than me. Surely God is a greater wisdom than me, even though I don't comprehend it. It's hard for me to comprehend.
I have a question about Malka's question.
I don't know what Malka is.
She was talking about curiosity, but how do you deal with people who are just totally closed-minded? I don't want to learn Torah. I don't want to hear it. Like, how do you?
Who says you have to deal with it? Who says you have to deal with everything? I don't think the question is how do you deal with yourself? Forget about how you deal with somebody else. So this is all how to deal with oneself.
Isn't it the Chabad
No, you do your best. You do your best, but you're not always. Your obligation is not to. Your obligation is to be an example. Your obligation is to teach. Your obligation is not to what the person is going to do with it. It's his responsibility. It's not my responsibility. I do my best. You cannot take responsibility for somebody else's action.
But people should be open-minded. It's a very bad choice.
And you find some people that are not open-minded. Nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
It's their mind. You can't control their mind. You're not here to control other person's mind.
But I think what Malka said was beautiful, because what she was saying is
Everything she says is
the beginning
beautiful.
of wisdom is the
Thank you very much.
the curiosity to learn more.
Right.
The passion.
I have a passion to
Yeah,
learn.
that's the word.
It's just a major passion to learn
To-
more of
Beautiful.
why I feel the way I
But
do.
that you have a passion is because you had a
A lot of
chachma.
people just have no passion. They're just dead.
We all have passions.
Some people just want to watch TV.
They have a passion for TV.
I hate TV.
It's also a passion. What do you mean? I have
I have
passion.
a passion for my computer.
Everybody has a passion in life.
I do. I love my computer.
Because they think that the TV is giving them they have everything else in life is pretty boring, and the TV is giving them their excitement in life.
I'm good.
How about the computer though?
Huh?
It gives you everything.
I'm back.
Some people,
Except for God,
yeah.
of course.
I wanted to ask you, you said you, as a rabbi, so you have someone that you ask also?
Sure.
You have your own rabbi? that-
Sure,
So if
Sure.
you're stumped for something, you ask?
I'm stumped with a lot of things.
No. So you have someone?
Sure, I have a rabbi.
You're not
I have a
perfect.
rabbi that I consult
You're
with.
the
100% I have a rabbi that I consult.
but you're the teacher.
Because it's impossible. It's impossible to know everything. It's impossible. There's some questions you shouldn't answer. Life and death issues, I wouldn't answer such kind of questions. I wouldn't take the responsibility.
So you would go to your rabbi?
I'd go to another rabbi. Right? Because I feel that he has a greater knowledge in this situation. Like in the laws of kosher, I'll go to a person that's knowledgeable in it. I'm not so knowledgeable, even though I know general. It's very complicated. It's not so simple. You got to go somebody that's a professional that knows the laws of kashrus. So you go to a professional. So it's not embarrassing to go to somebody who's more knowledgeable. It's impossible that everybody's knowledgeable in there's so many things today in Jewish concepts, whether it's in kashrus, whether it's in the laws of Shabbos, whether it's in the laws of family purity. Today's bigger laws in family, childbirth. These are very difficult concepts, and you should never think that you know what you're talking about. You should always ask a question to somebody. Always ask a question to somebody who's more knowledgeable.
And be respectful
that's
to
true.
them.
I had a journalism teacher once in college who said, there's never a question that doesn't deserve an answer. And that stuck with me all these years. Forever.
That's beautiful.
No, it's going to stick with me.
And everything has a question.
Yeah. I mean, there's never
Everything has a question. So you when you learn Gemara, you'll realize that concept. You understand how to learn Gemara. You'll see that you just take a verse very simple, and then you learn Gemara, and the verse is far from simple. It's far from the simple verse. It's totally out there. It's totally transformed. The whole verse that you looked at, that you thought it was a simple verse, now it's a whole different verse. How'd you get to that? How do we go from here to there? I mean, it's like unbelievable. And how do sages learn from this? That's unbelievable. So why? Because nothing is simple. Everything has within it a wisdom, and wisdom is not a simple thing. Wisdom is not a simple thing. It's not. It's because it's continuous. But let's go back to what the Rebbe wants to bring over here. So this divine sphere of Chachma which is not apprehendable to any created being. That is Yotze Beratious. The Eibishter created wisdom. The Eibishter created Beratious wisdom. The God who created wisdom is self-understood. If God and His wisdom are one, so just like God is incomprehensible, not understandable, how is wisdom understandable? I'm only on the bottom of the 4th page. This creation occurs every time and moment. This is what the Baal Shem Tov, the teaching of Baal Shem Tov. Teaching of Baal Shem Tov is God didn't create the world 5,781 years ago. God creates the world every moment. Every moment God creates the world. This is actually the most important part of this teaching of the Alter Rebbe, that the Eibishter creates the world every single moment. Why? Because it's wisdom. If the Eibishter created the world through wisdom, which is fluid, which continuously develops, which continuously changes, which continuously, we're changed by wisdom, which continues to develop and to move and to transform and to build, it's never ending, this creation. Creation that never ends and continues to be created continuously. So if God created the world through Bina, through understanding, or like we say through speech, then there's a beginning and there's an end. But if you believe that God created the world, even though He created it through Dibur, through speech, but the Eibishter it started off with wisdom, then it's unlimited. Then it's not only unlimited, it's continuous. It's continuously. The Eibishter created the world a minute ago, and He creates the world in a minute from now.
Every millisecond.
So that's what we say. That's the prayer. We're thanking God for creating the world every moment. At which all created beings come into existence through God's wisdom, which animates everything. God's wisdom, which animates everything constantly, every moment. God is creating the world. So now turn the page. I'm skipping. You can take this home and learn this a little more. Let's turn the page. I'm sorry I don't have page numbers here. I'm going to page 6. Now, when a man will contemplate in depth his understanding, and will moreover picture in his mind how he comes into being Exel Nila every single moment. The Eibush at this moment brought you into existence again.
He's having you teach us.
So now, how can he entertain the thought that he's suffering?
It's true.
He's not happy.
How can he contain it? How do you put the two cards together? How do you understand A and understand B? It doesn't make sense after that. How can he entertain the thought that he's suffering? Or that he's has any affliction related to his children's life, his health, his sustenance, whatever worldly sufferings. Why not? For the ayin, which I say is the wisdom of God, is a source of life, goodness, and delight. It is the Eden that transcends the world to come. We always say Gan Eden, you're in paradise. In Hebrew, it's Gan Eden. Gan, if you look at the Torah, it says Gan, there was an Eden, and there was a Gan in the Eden. There was a garden in the Eden. That means that there's Gan, there's paradise, and there's Eden, something that is before paradise, higher than paradise. Like I said to the we're all worried about Gan Eden. We all are hoping for Gan Eden. But Gan Eden is also limited. Gan Eden is also limited. I'm looking for above limitation. Why am I keeping looking for limitations when I should be looking for above limitations?
So Gan Eden is...
Because that's what even is saying. Gan Eden. Where in Gan Eden you're going to be? You're going to be a higher Gan Eden, lower Gan Eden. You're going to be complaining again. Right? Oh, I'm not in a good part of Gan Eden. I'm in a bad... Right? You're going to come to Gan Eden, and you're going to complain about Gan Eden too. That you're not comfortable enough. You need to be in a better Gan Eden. Right?
How come he's over here? And I'm
That's right. That's right. So you're complaining will never end. Why? Because there's limitations in Gan Eden. So there's limitations in Gan Eden too. That's why we'll keep on looking for limitations. We keep on looking for limited revelations. Limited revelations. Why do we keep on looking for limited revelations? Because we're limited in our brain. Our wisdom is so limited that we continue to look for limitations. When a person should look for beyond limitations. He's connected to God. That's beyond limitations. Everything is created through wisdom of God, which is above limitations. So he's connected to something that's above limitation. And actually, according to Chassidus, you can get that above limitation right over here in the world. You don't have to wait for Gan Eden. Actually, you're not going to get it in Gan Eden. You're only going to get it over here in the world. So therefore, why are you waiting for Gan Eden? You should be waiting every moment to receive, to try to touch. And how do you do that? That is by trusting the Eibishter. That's by trusting God. And I have no worries. I have no worries. I trust in God. I'm here to serve the Eibishter. I'm here, whatever God wants I should do. I have no worries. The seconds I have worries, I'm back to limitations.
No, it's...
Let's finish this off. Except that because it's not apprehendable, one imagines that is suffering or affliction. In truth, however, no evil descends from above, and everything is good. Everything is good. I love it.
Yeah.
Although it's not apprehendable as such because it's immense and abundant of goodness, that's the problem. It's so good that that we can't even understand it. Right? What?
She wants to know where you are. I said he's screaming all around.
No, I'm holding page 7. I'm holding page 7. I'm holding the 7th page.
Yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm holding it, right? Though it's not apprehendable as such, because it is immense, abundant to goodness, at the level which is inconceivable to man. Right? So I'm connecting to the wisdom of God, which the wisdom of God is not conceivable to man. So how can I comprehend this to be good or bad? I trust that everything is good. Everything is good. I'm a chaya.
biggest machaya is that Hashem wakes us up in the morning.
And this is the essence of faith for which man was created. This is the essence of faith. I'm turning the page. I'm holding the last 2 pages. Okay, I want you to take this home and learn it. This is not for one. Already, it's an hour already. This is not for one class. You should learn to read it and read the interpretations of it. I'm skipping the interpretation. You should read it and read it and read it. And as it out to ever started over, I'm giving you, enlighten you with understanding. Understanding is not going to.
Tanya, that's in from the Rebbe.
They put it in. His children added it to Tanya. How many letters? Oh, wow. Yeah, don't stump the rabbi. I think I'm not sure. You open up the book, you'll see how many letters there are.
You'll see how many.
You can see how many letters there are.
You like me
I
a
don't
little
have
wisdom.
an actual Tanya. I have commentaries.
Yeah, you should buy the Tanya. And this is the essence of faith in which man was created. To believe that there's no place void of him. God is everywhere. And in the light of the king's countenance, there is life. Les asar poneminei, ube'er pnei melachayim. And in the light of God, and the light God, I'm sorry, I'm going to Hebrew and English. In the light of King Countenance, there is life. So you heard when one encounters the king face to face, he's granted life. If in this temporal world a man sentenced to death should encounter his king, his sentence may be commuted, and he's granted life. For in the light of the king's countenance there is life. The same is true as above. In the presence of God, the King of the world provides everything with life. Accordingly, strength and gladness is his place. The fact that God is found everywhere, should encourage a man by strengthening his trust and thereby fulfilling it with joy. For whatever predicament he finds himself in, God is there too. And wherever God is present, there is strength and gladliness. Why? Because he is but good all the time.
This was absolutely the most.
That's it, my friend. That's it. You just need to
you.
learn a Tanya of the Alter Rebbe, a letter of the Alter Rebbe. This should change your whole life.
It does.
Because if you learn this and you learn this and you learn this, you cannot be the same person that after learning this over and over, that anything in the world should bother you, but nothing should bother you. Because you're here to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is it.
Oh,
Nothing
I
else.
think the rabbi gave it to me.
Next week in Rich Shem, we are going to be in New York City, Be'ezat Hashem, with the help of God. Who knows what's going to happen? But we'll be in New York, so we won't be here next Sunday. Have a wonderful and beautiful day.
If you ask to read this over.
Oh.